Welcome everybody. I'm the air quotes comedian, the man who entertainment tri-weekly likened to having a voice like an amplified dentist drill, and this is the Polemics podcast. Welcome. Let's get this straight right off of the fucking bat. I do not give a flying flea jumping fuck about the culture wars, because it's bullshit, right? An example of culture warfare is the war on Christmas. What happened was one day Fox News decided to round up a ragtag bunch of knuckle-dragging ex-Marines and furnish them with the leftover military hardware from the Balkans War, told them to shoot up a nativity scene displayed in Chicago somewhere, and to shout "Happy Holidays" while doing it. Up till now, nobody has pegged this event, which I may have just made up, as a false flag, in order to perpetuate the kind of nonsense talking points that fucker Carlson constantly spews out of the secondary arsehole that sits squarely in the middle of his face. But I, air quotes comedian, can prove it and have the video footage which I could show you all if only there was a Betamax video recorder left in the world to play it on. Okay, hold on to your hats because I'm about to do something really out of character. That's right, I'm going topical. Have you ever tried Hasbro's potatoes? They're overpriced, overpackaged, and they taste of plastic. My fucking air fryer is ruined. Conservatives would have you believe that they are bent out of shape over whether plastic potatoes have genders or not, and manufacturers of plastic potatoes would have you believe that they give a steaming sandbagger's shit about transgender rights. Hasbro literally expect to be applauded by progressives for saving money on printing costs. Conservatives and Hasbro are not in opposition to each other, they are working side by side and having a good chuckle while manipulating a population into fiercely emoting about something that is, at the end of the day, utterly fucking meaningless. So, excuse me if I don't give a tiddlywinky's toss about the culture wars, or, as I like to call it, keeping an entire population at each other's throats in order to distract us all from endless wars, a dying planet, the never-ending rise of authoritarianism in supposedly democratic countries such as the USA and Britain, and the fact that Madonna might release another album. Speaking of music, another thing I absolutely, positively and resolutely couldn't give a felonious Flemish fuck about is that song by those women about how wet their cats are. My pussy gets wet from time to time as well, and you know what I do? I dry him off with a nice fluffy towel. I don't feel compelled to write a song about it, do I? I guess conservatives don't like cats very much, probably because cats instinctively know that conservatives are cunts. I'm being a bit facetious. For any conservatives listening, that's a word you can look up in the dictionary on your own goddamn time. Just kidding, nobody's listening to this. I don't care about that wet ass pussy song in particular, but I do feel that it's good that women are finally celebrating their sexuality and sexual desires out in the open, which is something I've said before in another podcast no fucker has watched. I'm not bitter. Much. I think maybe the conservatives are pretending to be out of sorts over this nothing burger song because the protagonists are black women, i.e. the sort of people conservatives want back on the fucking plantation where they supposedly belong. Aren't you fucks happy enough to disenfranchise the minority vote? I can't help but notice that this wet ass pussy bullshit is drowning out that very real issue that's happening all over the USA right now. And that's what the culture wars are all about, aren't they? That's why, give me a second, I've got to think of a nice alliterative way of saying I don't give a fuck. Nope, I'm drawing a blank. Anyway, I don't give a fuck about it. I couldn't care less if a couple of women scissor each other with their clothes on at some meaningless award ceremony that exists purely to pander to the egos of pop stars and make money off of the sort of people who invest their time and energy into watching it. Fuck me, if conservatives are upset about a G-rated performance like that, then their heads would literally explode at the stuff you can see on free-to-air television in Europe. See, I can be topical if I want to. I just generally try to do material that's a little more evergreen, which is a comedic oxymoron if ever there was one. So, this podcast in particular is going to age faster than the term YOLO, or whatever the fuck it is the young people tattoo on their faces these days. I couldn't give a dunking Dutchman's dump about Pepe Le Pew not being renewed, right? I'm not saying that Pepe wasn't problematic, but I watched it when I was a whippersnapper and I grew up to treat bitches with the utmost respect. And if I see another fucking post on the social media from a Mexican person saying they're cool with Speedy Gonzales, I am going to repeatedly slam my head with the oven door until I'm stone dead. Of course Mexicans are fine with Speedy Gonzales. He's a positive role model, isn't he? He always comes out on top and he's fucking superpowered. I mean, let me put it this way. I suspect black people don't want to hear about loving watermelons and might just tell you to fuck right off if you said as much. But when was the last time a black man disavowed the stereotype of having a big dick? Come to that, when did any man that ever existed disavow the notion that they were packing anything other than a truncheon in their trousers? Oh, and when it comes to Black Lives Matter, which, as a white person, I have no business talking about beyond offering my unconditional support, let's get one thing straight. Black Lives Matter is a civil rights movement. It and other movements of its type shouldn't, in my opinion, be placed under the umbrella of culture wars. It's all of it, complete and utter bullshit designed to keep the majority of people engaged in meaningless pap, and the distraction is working. Most people think that the Republican and Democratic parties are at opposite ends of the ideological spectrum. No, they fucking aren't. They're both right-wing, neoliberal, authoritarian arseholes who pander to corporations and the rich, and despite very superficial differences, have no meaningful variation in their policies. Not that you would fucking know it listening to the news. Brought to you by the 8 corporations who, own the news media and have a vested interest in perpetuating the status quo. Not that you'd know it from the rabid, frothing at the mouth partisans, i.e. the general public, who have turned Team Red versus Blue into a fucking blood sport. How ridiculous is it that the political discourse has been reduced to which boot heel on your throat is preferable? Anyway, the point is that you should embrace communism, though the reading list is quite daunting. I arrived at work one time with Shostakovich blasting through the car speakers, because music is only ever worthwhile when it's of a sufficient volume to force others to enjoy it against their will as well. One of my cohorts, exiting her vehicle, said, and I paraphrase, but the gist of it was, "I don't understand classical music, nor do I know anything about it." The implication being that she was ultimately intimidated by a particular musical art form. My response was, it's just music. Of course, now that I've had several years to think about it, my response should have been, you're certainly not alone being somewhat wary of high culture, because the higher echelons of society want us, the hoi polloi, to think it's not for us, which is ludicrous when you think about it, because most of what constitutes high culture was created by the proletariat. You think Beethoven was a posh bloke? Nah, not at all. His mother was a coal miner and his father was a bus driver. You think Bach was a toff? Not in the least. His mother died in the coal mines and his dad died crashing the bus he drove into a coal mine. You think Leonardo da Vinci was a sneering hoity-toity arsehat? Nothing could be further from the truth. His mother was a demolitions expert for the coal mines, and his dad drove miners to and from the coal mines in a bus. The upper classes have appropriated high culture from us and fooled you into thinking that the likes of ballet, sculpture, paintings, poetry, literature, opera, and classical music is theirs exclusively, while we're left with popular culture, which is basically whatever warm diarrhea erupts out of worthless television shows to numb our brains so that we don't think about the huge injustice foisted upon us by the cultural elite, or basically whatever cold, sick spews up out of our screens when we're endlessly browsing the internet looking at third-rate memes or shoddily shot cat videos in the quest to distract ourselves from the existential horror of our existence brought about by the capitalist tyranny we live under. Heaven fucking fend that I might want to watch a ballet rather than the effluent that is Deal or No Deal, a show so lacking in artistry that I'd rather punch my own bollocks repeatedly in the hope of feeling something other than total boredom. But when you say to your mates that you're partial to the Ring des Nibelungen, and they give you that look, don't they? Their little faces, puzzled and querying, perhaps wondering if you've just stepped off an alien mega yacht. But tell the same mates that you're tired of being a man and that you've decided that you're going to transition into a kangaroo and that from now on you want to be called Joey, and they're totally on board, clapping you on the back and offering their congratulations. But listening to Wagner, they don't quite know what to do with that information. Of course, that could be because they're fully aware of Wagner and are simply puzzled as to why I, a full-on SJW, would give any thrift to an old German composer who was a raging anti-Semite. At the end of the day, it's just music though. Another intimidation practiced by the snobby guardians of high culture is the sniggering attitude they have to the great unwashed when it comes to critiquing or evaluating art. No. You don't have to have a fucking degree in fine arts to appreciate a painting. You see them though, don't you, gathered around some modern art piece, stroking their chins and musing on the nature of it, utilising the highfalutin language of tossers that have a large vocabulary coupled with the intellect of a mouldy potato. Picasso, I hate to break it to you, is in fact a bit shit. Jackson Pollock, more like bullshit bollocks. At least that's my opinion, which I'm entitled to just as you are. If you are somehow moved by Jackson Pollock, as the chattering classes pretend to be, then all power to you. And that's the point, isn't it? Art is a subjective experience and not all of it is going to affect you. I happen to enjoy classical music, a vast area of music comprising of different eras. Baroque, or Baroque if you're one of those clueless cunts who don't know how to pronunciate properly, classical, romantic, nationalist, 20th century, and the modern era. Ironically, while I enjoy classical music, I don't think all that much of the classical era, because it's as dull as Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. As for the modern era, Jesus fucking Christ on a mountain bike. I'm all for pushing the envelope, but damn. I'm constantly searching for new music to listen to. Now, while I know a bit about classical music, because you can't help but know something about it when you've been into it all your life, I know precisely fuck all about jazz. Did that stop me from getting into jazz recently? No, it did not. I just plunged right in. If an artist makes a noise I like, then I like it. Jazz snobbery is the worst. A bunch of self-congratulatory wankers who, again, want to keep it exclusively for themselves. Well, I'm not sorry for stepping on your toes, am I? You smug, self-satisfied twats. I mean, like 100% of jazz musicians are working class. You think they wanted their music to be uniquely enjoyed by pipe-smoking middle-class fuckwits who wear tweed jackets with leather elbow patches? It's for everybody, and if somebody wants to listen to it, then they shouldn't be made to feel like an idiot for doing so. It's just music. There's an old British TV series called Cracker, a crime drama. In one bit, the featured criminal, a working class type, has carjacked some middle class woman who happens to have the radio on, and it's playing a piece of classical music. The criminal identifies the composer and the piece of music, and then remarks to the captive woman, "I expect you're surprised I know that." I thought to myself, why? You know what would surprise me though? If some upper class twit carjacked me and correctly identified the artist and song playing from my radio, when the artist was Napalm Death and the song was Suffer the Children. You know what else would surprise me? If the upper classes knew anything at all about high culture. You think you could have an in-depth conversation about the complexities of the anti-Stalinist sentiment in the music of Shostakovich with some Harvard-educated toff? Most of the upper classes are incapable of understanding the very things they're supposed to venerate. Just because they're moneyed doesn't change the fact that they're largely inbred, unintellectual morons who may know what fork to use at the banquet, but are completely ignorant of anything beyond their own hedonism. So, I say to you, listen to what you want without fear. It's only music, right? If it's a noise you like, then listen to it. That's what I should have said to my co-worker. But that's probably too much information to impart in the half a minute it took to walk from the parking lot to the nurses' station. I think I firmly established that I am ambivalent about the more meaningless culture wars. As a dork, right? That's what I am, a dork. I know my nomenclature. I'm not a geek or a nerd. Dork. As a dork, I'm partial to Doctor Who, Star Trek and Star Wars. If they want to make any of those things with a cast of nobody but coloured transgender vegan communists, I'm absolutely fucking fine with it. I couldn't give two honking salamander shits if the supposed boogeyman of so-called diversity hiring at the BBC gives us a cast of characters for Doctor Who that don't represent the demographics of a middle-class audience who live in a small Berkshire village that hasn't seen a person of colour since Lenny Henry stopped at the fish and chip shop that one time in 2002. What the fuck did it matter that one of Doctor Who's compadres was a woman of colour playing a lesbian? It's not like they were going to show her scissoring butt naked with the innards of a Dalek, is it? Yet, surprisingly, there are a number of people who are white and heterosexual and cis male, just like I am, who care a great deal about these things and say so frequently and vociferously on the YouTube. Ironically, they refer to people like me as SJWs and or snowflakes. And yet I'm not the one who gives a fuck about any of this bullshit, am I? The only thing I do give a shit about when it comes to the TV I watch is this. Am I entertained? If not, it's hammer time for my bollocks. Also, do you honestly think that the people making television and movies actually give a rollicking rat's ass about anything other than the bottom line? Sure, they're representing transgender people a little more, but you can bet audience share and dollar signs are at the bottom of it rather than anything truly meaningful. But the idiot YouTube snowflakes who are highly critical of seeing anything other than toxic white masculine characters and buxom scream queens, with some Sarah Connor from the Terminator exceptions, think it's all some progressive conspiracy to cancel what they perceive to be the fucking default position of the entire human race, i.e. white, straight and male. Do they even live in the real world? No, they don't. The real world to them is something resembling 1950s America, where the white man was king and darky was violently kept in their place, and anything remotely resembling progress confounds them and drives them insane. It's amusing how these YouTubers try to be covertly bigoted too, as amusing as it can be given the fact that they represent the first step down the slippery rabbit hole that ultimately leads you to being recruited into the power knights of Hitler's shining shinbone. Now, while I can't speak for the LGBTQ plus community or people of colour or talking raccoons, I do suspect that these communities do enjoy seeing themselves represented on screens large and small, even if said representation is only to snatch their hard-earned dollars from their wallets. For someone who professes not to give a shit about this subject, I'm sure talking about it a lot. Well, that ends now.